Perfect. Okay. I think we are ready to go. So, Jeremy, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. So this is just another line of a continuation of series where, as an organization, we're very data centric and we're trying to figure out what all of that means. And as we do that, we want to bring that information to the market and help you guys understand what we're seeing. Obviously, there's a lot of experts in the crowd as well. So a lot of opinions, more opinions the better. So again, we're really good at data and technology. What we're not really good at is how to go apply that to each of your individual roles and responsibilities. So it's on us to really kind of share with you what we're seeing happening in the market, what we're seeing from the data. And the goal of our conversation today is to shed some light on all of that. So I'm Jeremy Hewitt. So basically my primary responsibility is to ensure that as we continue to grow the organization, we're always going towards value for our customers. So all that means for you is, again, we're great at data and technology. What we're not great at is how do we apply that to make your lives easier, better, make it more impactful for you to use that data to make better decisions. My primary responsibility is taking all of that feedback to ensure it gets into product so we can continue to provide really great solutions for you that really actually do something significant for your organization. So Andy, you want to do a quick intro yourself?
Sure. Andy Campbell. A lot of you have been on these webinars before, and so we're a little familiar with each other. But before I even begin in the intro, Jeremy brings up a good point that the feedback that we get from you all really helps us develop our knowledge and helps us form the data that we're seeing into something even greater. And just in the past couple of weeks, I've had conversations with a couple of you, some that's on the webinar, about compact tractors, and that really brought to light and added color into a lot more of the data we're seeing, help explain everything. So the more questions that you ask or the more feedback you provide, it's only helping. So a little bit about myself. I help farm up in Northern Iowa. We run a row crop farm up there. So that also helps me provide a little bit of light to what we're seeing. And then along with that, I just get a chance to study the markets, go to some conventions and understand what's happening in the greater agricultural economy. And so I'm trying to pull that information in to help make sense of this data. So a little bit of the presentation today will be doing just that. We'll be pulling a little bit of that external and then tying it in with our data just to make sense of everything.
Yeah, I think Andy's really great at making data consumable. And again, you'll see that come through in our presentation today, but he's obviously got the chops as he helps his dad run the operation up in Northern Iowa, but having that background and that interest in really trying to understand what the data means. I think this is a little bit of a passion. I'll speak for him, but a little bit of a passion project for him as well. So we'll go ahead and jump in. For those unfamiliar with TractorZoom, as you'll understand, there's kind of two components to our business, TractorZoom, and some of the folks online have subscribed to IronComps. They're kind of two different solutions. Our TractorZoom solution is really that farmer-facing solution. So we're partnering with our auctioneers and our dealers to ensure our farmers have the quickest, easiest way to go find, value, and get connected to the seller of that equipment as quickly and easily as possible from their phone. Obviously, farmers spend 86% of the time online on their mobile device. And we've built a solution to help them do all of those things, introduce some price transparency to help them make really good decisions, and then immediately get pushed over to our partners who list on TractorZoom, just that ungated information to get over to them. So you that are on the phone, that are sellers, have immediate access to that lead and that person can go take action. So I think we're getting close to 500,000 monthly active users. So continuing to grow this side of the business. But really, we're very intentional about helping that farmer and then helping our auctioneer and dealer partners get access to those leads as quickly and easily as possible. On the backside, all of that information, we standardize that information, the equipment specs, we standardize all the valuation information based on what's happening in the market. And we're really using that on the back end in IronComps, which we'll see in a little bit, Even on Tractor Zoom, there's some lightweight stuff that our farmers can do. They can build equipment lists. We can give them kind of the Kelley Blue Book indicators and track their price over time. But it's all about helping everyone that's touching equipment make more confident decisions, whether that's increasing your margin, reducing time on lot and increasing turns, or if it's making sure that we're stress testing our entire portfolio and just having better data on the equipment that we have on a balance sheet. Regardless of who's touching this information, we want to make sure it's there as quickly as possible and the information is as complete as possible so you can make as confident as a decision as possible. So to date, so we're partnered with over 635 auction companies. We have roughly about 85% of everything that'll sell at auction in the US on an annual run rate, captured within the Tractor Zoom environment and then over into Iron Comps. The dealer stores, we continue to partner with those folks to get them free leads. And we're doing some interesting things in the back end with helping out with inventory as well. We've actually just hired another resource to continue to make sure we're focusing on our dealers to help get their inventory in front of our growing audience. As you can see, there's some other big data points within here. The overall theme is growth, and we're staffing for that growth, and we're continuing to listen to our customers to ensure that as we grow this thing, we're growing towards value for you all that may already be customers or folks who are considering getting more granular with their data to make better decisions. So I'll throw it over to Andy. He's going to be kind of the brains behind the operation here. He's going to help you all make sense of some of the data that we're seeing. So this is just kind of a quick agenda of what we're going to run through, but I'll kind of hand the mic over to him and let him do his thing. So
Fantastic. Thank you, Jeremy. And so like I mentioned earlier, we're going to start at a high level and talk about this external environment a little bit. Just some of the things that you might be want to watch for coming up in 2023. You know, this is mainly focused on ag lending, but I know there's a lot of dealers in here as well. This is all pertinent for everybody. We might be covering things at a high enough level when we get down into the trends that if you want more detailed analysis, you know, just contact me afterwards and we can jam on any of these topics for a lot longer than maybe an hour that we have today. But we'll start high level, the agricultural landscape. Then we're going to dive into the equipment trends, so combines, and we have those now broken down by class. And so we're finding some interesting and different trends that are going down there by class. Tractors and all types of tractors. We spent a little bit of time on compacts and utilities today, more than we usually do. And then the sprayers and the planters, and even dove into the forage equipment. I started splurging there and I went down a rabbit hole, but try to keep that one short. And then, you know, and then we'll go into some industry best practices. And on those, and this is going to break up the webinar a little bit, but it's maybe a little known fact. I actually spent about 8 years as a professor, and I can tell you the worst thing to do is to drone on with all the things that I think are important, and then everybody falls asleep, and then hit on some stuff at the end that you need to know. So what we're going to do is we're going to sprinkle some of these best practices throughout. Bear with us if some of the transitions are a little rough, but especially if you're an ag lender, there's some really good best practices, things that you know your day out or can help out the farmer that you're partnering with. So those will be out there, as well as a big update here on the Iron Comp side. Well, let's dive in. So let's get a couple questions. Okay, and we're gonna add in a little bit, well, speak a little bit louder so just everybody can hear me. Okay. There we go. Okay, so at a high level, and for any of you on the Western Plains, this is not anything new. Most of you have already heard about the drought that's going through the Western United States. That's going to have an impact on the equipment industry, and we're going to especially dive into that once we hit on the forage business. But a couple of trends for you to really pay attention to in terms of weather this next year is really the breaking of the current weather cycle. So the La Nina is going on right now, and it's showing signs of weakening. The El Nino is showing signs of gaining. At a high enough level, if you're not familiar with what the two are, it's essentially the El Nino. When that does come in, we're looking at a wetter spell over the entire United States, which will be welcome, especially for the Western Plains. That can have a great impact on any of the crop production, but especially the forage industry, the cattle industry that's been thinned out there, especially in Oklahoma and the Dakotas. So
Why that's important though for you is obviously it's going to shift the commodity markets. One of the other things that it's going to do though is change the regionality. And just because we are seeing a lot of equipment bought across state lines, but when you have differences like you see here in this map, it's going to create disparate opportunities for farmers in one area versus another, and it still costs quite a bit, especially with larger equipment, to ship that from one region to another. So just like you might have a basis with corn or soybeans, you've got a difference in regionality and price when it comes to certain machines. Now, markets. High level, we're going to hit on soybean production, although Ukraine pops into this from a consumption standpoint. China is important. But if you haven't heard the news, Brazil is busting at the seams right now with soybeans. They're just starting to combine those. The wet has delayed their production or their harvest a little bit, which might delay the second corn planting. But by and large, Brazil has grown a ton. If you look here over the past, 15 years, their soybean production is growing immensely. And so that's something that's going to come into play. It's playing now. It's going to go come into play in the future. But one thing to keep in mind, though, and you see this with Argentina, with the lack of rains that Argentina is getting, they're having one of the bigger deficits ever. And so with fertilizer and rain, if it misses down in South America, it's going to have a huge bust effect. But if it hits, it's going to have a major boom effect. And so while they are taking a bigger part of production in the global stage, the global consumption is also rising as population continues to grow. But I would expect more variability based on those weather patterns that you see in South America. So just pay attention. You don't have to be a meteorologist, but know, whatever comes out of South America, especially when obviously we're not producing this time of year, they are, that's going to dictate a lot of the market. And then finally, inflation. So everybody knows inflation is going on. And in fact, it's kind of the reason why we're on this webinar today. We want to know, has equipment gone up? Is it going down? This, we've dealt with inflation before. We're not to where we were in the 80s, especially with those interest rates. But one of the things to keep in mind, especially if you're lending to farmers, and maybe this is more or less remind your farmer of this, that what you see here on this chart is inflation adjusted corn prices. So we have corn prices that are now close to topping what we saw in the 2012-2013 season. But if you adjust that for inflation, and there's a lot of inflationary pressures on farmers with the inputs, rent, obviously land prices, you've got fertilizer prices, even those have come down a little bit, but chemicals, everything is up. And so the realized value that they're getting from their corn is not quite what it was back in 2012, 2013. And so just take a quick look at this chart to realize relative, this is back in 2022, we're in 23 now, so it's extended out a little bit here, but not to where we were back in 2012, not to where we were in 96, and not even in the mid 80s. Now, one thing that is also important to note is good times never last. And so the biggest fix for high prices are high prices. And once there were high prices, people produce more. South America puts more land into production. There becomes a surplus because there's profits to be had. And so that creates this long tail that swoops down after each one of these events. That is going to happen here. We just don't know when. It might be this year, it might be next, it could possibly be the year after, but it will happen at some point in time. And so I know a lot of you lenders are aware of this, but it's also a good reminder to a lot of the farming partners to be aware of it as well once they're making these purchases, whether it's a long-term or short-term capital purchase. And so all this in summary really is that the farming industry is so dynamic, way more dynamic than probably what it was prior to our lifetimes, just with the changing times, changing technologies. And so with that volatility, it becomes so much more important to keep tabs on the risks on your balance sheet. And I know, Jeremy, you talked to a lot of people about this.
Yeah, I would say over the last, 5 or 6 years, there's just been more focus on ensuring that the right amount of information is captured from the farmer on that balance sheet to ensure that we have a better pulse on what equipment's doing. So it's a volatile market. The cost of equipment continues to rise. As we all know, the sophistication of this equipment continues to to grow. So, as farmers are growing their operations, whether it be by, getting more rented land, whatever it is, that balance sheet item for machinery continues to grow. So how do we ensure that we're, looking out for not only our farmers, but our own interests to ensure that, we are de-risked as much as possible by, keeping that pulse on what the machinery market is doing. So we'll get into some of this trend stuff. So I think Andy's got some really good data as we get into what's going on. Obviously, we're going to hit on some big items today, some things that are relevant to current times right now as well. And then, as he mentioned, like if there's anything you guys want to drill into a bit more or have questions about, please feel free to send those in Q&A, and or if you want to, kind of, as he mentioned, jam out a little bit on it. We're happy to have those conversations off the call as well. So
Awesome. Okay, let's start with combines. And before we even dive into this, I just want to give everybody a heads up. We've done a little bit of a different look on this analysis. So the next couple of pages, there will be multiple different pieces of information that are on there. So we'll go through the first few slowly, but I do want to keep this thing rolling. So with the recording that I send out later, if you want to go back through and check out any of these and pause them as you, decipher what's on there, you'll have the chance to do that. And also a big thanks to Casey Seymour, who runs the Moving Iron podcast. And it's actually in collaboration with him. We're sending them a little bit of information every month just to keep updated values. And then he's breaking that down on his podcast. So if you haven't checked out Moving Iron podcast, it's fantastic. And so you'll get a little similar look to what you're going to see here. And then Casey and his buddy Aaron, they break those down about every week, every month.
yeah, one thing I'll mention too is Andy transitions into here. So for those folks who have been in iron comps, traditionally the combine area has needed a little extra love, and what you'll see in today's solution is we started to introduce the classes, so you can now start to break down data a little bit better by class. It's what everybody in the dealer world and everybody related to equipment has always done, but now for like our financial institutions, you can help those farmers make more intelligent buying decisions and selling decisions, and help break that down by class of combine. So you're going to see a lot of his data revolve around the class. And just as a side note, we've kind of introduced some of that into iron comps if you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. After we get done with these combines, maybe we'll break and go into iron comps so you can see what that looks like. In the breakdown that you see on your screen right here. So we're summarizing class 6 combines here. We'll move on to class 7 next. But in the upper left, we just, for this section of combines that we're looking at here, it's all the class 6 combines, averaging about 2,600 step hours on those. The stuff that's currently on dealer lots averages about 2,100. So when you're starting to see averages of prices, then you can look up here and say, okay, what does that represent? How much usage is on that particular machine? And then again, across the top, this really represents a lot of what's in the dealer's lots, but you'll start to see where the supply really lies in terms of usage on a dealer's lots. So class 6 combines, older combines, John Deere really isn't committed to making any more class 6 combines. So you're seeing that production really turn into a bell curve that's moved on, and with the mass of it sitting around 2,000 to 2,500 step hours. And that's how you can read that distribution of what's currently out there. Off to this side is really how I toggle between the different combines. Class 6 right now is available, but when you're looking on a dealer lot, some people don't have a great frame of reference of how much is an average class 6 combine, about $100,000. Again, sitting on a dealer lot, not for auction up here, which would be considerably lower. And then down below, though, we get to see dealership in blue compared to auction in gray, average, and see how those average monthly values are trending. Here, I think we're about over the past year plus a month. So we get to compare December of 21 all the way to current stuff through this January. And so really for class 6 combines, I've gone through because there is a lot on here, and I've just gone and summarized a little bit. But in general, and we're seeing this start to happen with combines, you're going to see a trend coming here when we look at all the classes. Auction values of these are dropping. Dealer values might be up, but they're up fairly modestly, and there's not a lot on dealer lots anymore. But in general, people are going for bigger combines. And so that's what you see with class 6 combines, is that auction price
dropping slightly. Now, as we move up to Class 7 combines, this section that I'm looking at right here, is for all different combines. You can start to see the production. There's some that are made more recently. So obviously you've got some 0 to 500 hours that are sitting on a dealer lot. But in general, almost $200,000. Now for a trend year over year in Class 6 combines, you're seeing these bust up. And this is where, you'll see this in Class 8 in a second. I would have expected Class 7 not to rise as much as Class 8, but we really saw Class 8 last year go gangbusters. It was a highly sought after size of combine. Class 7 lagged just a little bit. Now what we're seeing this year, and there is some seasonality built into this. Obviously you have higher values in December happening, but auction values for those rose about 16%. Dealer values still modest of what you saw with Class 6 at rising about 4%. Now here with Class 8, this is kind of what I was talking about, where most of them are, still being produced. So you have that bell curve that you're really only seeing the right half of that so far because there's still combines yet to be produced in age. And, less hours on average than what you saw with the Class 7, both in auction and in dealer, with an average value of about $275,000. But this was the first surprising thing when I pulled the values. Really for auction on Class 8s this year, flat year over year. A little bit of seasonality difference. When I diced this up for every single hour category I could, 500 to 1,000, 1,000 to 1,500, everything was either a +4 or a -4% sitting at auction. And it just kind of wavered around there. But again, we had such a massive move in Class 8 combines last year from a price standpoint that maybe that explained a lot of the price, and it's found its relative high right now. You will start to watch that dealer value though. It was 4% for 6 and 7. Now it's moving up to 5% year over year. And those dealer values, there's just so much more data within iron comps that you really take out a lot of the variability and you can hone in on a good year over year type of increase. And then we get to the beasts. So Class 9 and Class 10, massive combines, at least relative to what we're familiar with. Talking with a lot of the dealers and some OEMs, I don't think we're probably going to see combines larger than 9 and 10. When 8s came out, people didn't think we'd see anything larger than an 8, but we are truly hitting a limit on how big roads are here in the United States. How, you can't move things down certain roads because of bridges limitations, weights. And so we may be topping out here on 9s and 10s on how feasibly big a combine can get. But the price is certainly up there too from what we're used to. $350,000 on average. A lot of the machines, the used ones that are in this low hour category, easily are topping $500,000. And what you're really seeing for price, and this is going to be something that we see in some other equipment categories, that's a big year-over-year price increase for a dealer. We didn't include the auction year-over-year price just because there was so much variability as I moved around, and you're seeing so few of these machines at auction. And this is maybe just a tidbit for any lenders that's looking for a comparable out there. If you're comparing for a Class 9 and 10, trying to find a comp, don't look at auction necessarily because there's so few out there. And the grab in terms of short supply can be so disparate, depending on what neighbor's after it, that it might not be a great reliable value, but instead maybe look more towards those dealer lots and what they're bringing like new might be more indicative of what this large combine market is actually doing. And if you're wondering how big these combines are or how new they are, on average, these SEP hours are less than 1,000 that are sitting on a dealer lot. So they're relatively new. Okay, and so that summarizes the combine market, but I think we were talking about this might be a really good chance to break it down. And it always makes me worried when we break away from a PowerPoint and then go into not PowerPoint. But I was asked, here we are, in a recent call I had with, I think it was actually Josh Martin out at Atlantic Tractor, and he was saying, pull in here. how do you use some of the insights within Iron Comps? He was curious about how we use them. And we thought this might be a good opportunity to show if you're interested in not waiting for the next webinar, you want to find some insights, how can you find them? And so if you have dealer data, let's go in here and actually see what this different class of combines looks like.
Yeah, so this is what I mentioned earlier. So in the category search, now we can search across classes. And then again, Andy's going to kind of show you how he does it. Obviously, you can do it any which way you'd like, but it's sort of new functionality that's available for folks to use.
Mm-hmm. And I was talking also with a banker up in Northern Iowa. They're talking about a lot of their new ag lenders don't have a ton of ag experience, and they can jump in here to Iron Comps and then all of a sudden say, I don't even know what a Class 6 combine looks like. I don't have a relative frame of mind. I can go in here and now all of a sudden I can see pictures. I can see common models of what a Class 6 might look like, and then also get familiar with the Class 6 with 4,000 step hours versus 1,600 step hours. How does that appear different? Now, one thing that you can do if you have dealer data, you want to find those insights I was talking about, go up here to dealer listing average and click view trend on the graph. Now, this takes all of the current Iron Comps data. So there can be a lot in here, especially we've got a lot of combines, a lot of classic combines. If you have a good internet connection, it can come up pretty fast. If it's slower, you have to give it a few minutes to warm up. But what you can now see, and this is just over the past 3 months here, the trend of these Class 6 combines. And hopefully this doesn't break the system here, pulling in full year's worth of data. But you'll be able to pull up the average dealer trend over the past, in this case, year, as well as all the data points with auctions. So you'll get a pretty good frame of reference on what's the trending value of combines that are Class 6, all the auction values, and you can throw in any filter you want. So if you want a geo filter on here, put in a radius around your area of 200 miles, it'll just pull that data in. Now, and that all works for the top graph up here that you'll see for average listing price, and then the average days listed on a lot as well. Now, once you get down here below, then you can look at all combines that are Class 6, and that's general. It doesn't include the filters that you just threw in, but you can get this instantaneous, customized, line graph of where this market is headed just within Iron Comps search results, as long as you have the dealer data, which you would obviously need to get that blue line. So, any other things to add to this?
No,
Okay, so yeah, feel free if you've got this, dive in, pull up a Class 7, 8, all that good stuff. There's a lot there to look at. Okay. Didn't break it. It's good. Okay, now on to compact tractors. And I know that these hold less of a risk to a lot of the balance sheets, but there are some significant moves that are happening in compacts. And they're a good one to study just because the N statistically is so large on compacts. You can really start to understand what's going on in the market and what dealers are faced with. So big shout out to Kevin from Hoover out in Pennsylvania. He and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago on the challenge of pricing compacts right now. And it does go for any kind of tractor, but he said, especially for these right now, there was an oversupply in the pandemic, or the pandemic created an oversupply. Production ramped up. A lot of them sold. Some of those are coming back onto the market while the OEMs are still producing. So what we're having right now are a lot of those coming back, trying to be traded in for newer models while price increases are still happening from the OEMs. And so, to kind of put this in summary, what the dealers are having to be faced with is when they get a trade in, they still need to give the person a high enough value for the trade in that they want to trade in. But you can't price it so high that you put yourself out any money. If you price it so high when you do that trade in, that a new buyer will come in, and if they see that high price compared to a brand new price, it's pretty close to the same, you would never buy a used. And so then therefore that used one sits on your lot forever. You don't make any money on it. The holding costs eat away at you. And so you can't get into that situation. So dealers are really stuck there, but trying to find that perfect middle ground. And what that does is the higher that those new machines cost, it creates a little bit of a price drag because you have to essentially price line between brand new and maybe a 1 to 2 usage piece of machine. And so what you're seeing here within compacts, and I'm going to break down this hour and horsepower category in a second, is when you have very like new machines, you get a really strong price drag that's influenced more by new than the average used market. So when I've broken down compacts and utilities, I've done a like new category and I've done an older model that's got some usage. So here, down here in the bottom, you see a filter. These are only for compacts that have less than 100 hours on them. And there's still a lot of them, over 900 in this dealer data set, but on average, 30 to 40 type of hours. And, you know, what you're seeing here, I'm going to go to just the average summary, is you see one hellacious year-over-year price increase, both from auction and dealer. And this is after there's been so much supply out in the market that price drag is really pulling it up, and it's, you know, it's not really caring that there is a lot of these, that there are a lot of these sitting on the market. So if you're doing comps with compacts or anything new, really got to look at that dealer side and get those like new comparables. And again, I'm going to just point out here on the dealer side, that blue that you see shifting up, and I'd love some dealers' perspective on this. You're seeing that sharp uptick here. Get my mouse over right here from December up into January. Curious to know if that's an anomaly, even though there's a lot of data points in there, or if that's new year pricing on those used compacts. Would love your perspective to see, you know, what's really driving that, because a lot of that 43% year-over-year increase is from just this past month. Now, moving on to compacts, but I took the hour category 500 to essentially 1,000 hours. And with this one, about just as many N samples in this data set. Average auction hours are splitting that gap right up there in the mid 700s. And now you've got some reality setting in with an oversupply in the market. 5% at auction, only 3% up at the dealer space. And, you know, really not even keeping up with the general inflation rate that we've seen. So this is more of your supply and demand of what you might be used to. Okay, so that's compacts.
Yeah, so Andy had mentioned sprinkling a few things here in between just to break things up. So that feature that I mentioned previously about adding class 6 to the classes to our combine. So we proactively will send out a monthly update on iron comps, but stay tuned. We are going to have a kind of living, breathing knowledge base within the iron comps product. So at any point in time, any new product updates that come out, there'll be a resource there. We'll be able to house our webinars, any training sessions, any other videos that you may need to help make sure you're optimizing your experience within iron comps. That is on the way. So instead of waiting for webinars like this or waiting for your customer success manager to reach out, you're going to be able to go kind of proactively get that information as you need it when you do start seeing new things pop into iron comps. So there's my 30-second ad. Now back to Andy.
Okay. And you guys are special because you got the only sneak peek of this. I think Megan is going to be sending out an announcement on this one, maybe even just tomorrow. So be watching for that. But know that you're special. You saw this first. Okay. Utility tractors. So now with utility tractors, I did the same thing. I hit a lower hour category here, 500 to 1,000, before we break it out into a different category. But within this one, you know, we're seeing auction values not increase a whole lot. I think it was a conversation I've had a while ago with Casey Seymour from the Moving Iron podcast. He said, utility tractors, they're a commodity. And by a large part they are. There's a lot of attachments that you can add on to it and get a little bit more utility out of it. But they are commoditized for the most part. They're not pulling something massive in the field anymore. And so you're seeing that reflected really in the auction price, even for these low hours. Dealer values are going up a little bit, but I think that's more than likely due to just the modest price drag that you're getting. Because when the OEMs declare that they're going to do the biggest price increase year over year they ever have, that rising tide's pulling everything up. And so utilities not as much as others, but they're commodity. So compare this 5 and 17 here though, for these 500 to 1,000 hours. And here now we just bumped up a little bit from 1,000, but up to 3,000. And you can tell without me even clicking the button, it's flat. So it's even less than flat. So starting to see that take shape here. And again, this is a few different hour categories that I diced up. I pulled in, 4,000 and 5,000. And in general, it's either zero or we're seeing slight price declines in a lot of these used utility tractors. Okay, so now something a little more useful, especially as we get a little closer to spring planting season. So row crop tractors, at a high level, we just broke this one down now for 2,000 to 4,000. I think a lot of people have seen and understand if you're dealing with low hours. And for row crop tractors, I would, anything less than 2,000 is low hour, anything less than 1,500 for certain is closer to that like new category, especially for some of your late models. But for these used row crop tractors, and what I have designated as those are anything with 175 horsepower on up, and then just a front wheel drive system. So not articulating. Again, we're seeing modest price increases. We saw some really strong price gains in 21 and into 22. Now, as we go into 23, we may be leveling out a little bit. Getting back to that external agricultural data, there is a fair amount of uncertainty in the farming market. Interest rates being significantly higher than they have been in the past. I would really expect these values to top out and be a little bit more consistent, unless something else massive happens that disrupts the global supply of grain. And then now into the four-wheel drive tractors. So within this, I did four-wheel drives and also tracks, both very comparable average values, although obviously with some tractors in the 9 series, you're getting into some really incredible high values that they can pull that average up. But again, same hour values here, 2,000 to 4,000 that we just saw in the previous one, although horsepower here, just 300 horsepower plus. But looking at the graph again, you can kind of see a bit of the same story, which is why we're not spending as much time on it. Relatively modest at auction, about, a little bit stronger than we saw with the row crop tractors, but close to the same. And then dealer, again, a little stronger. When I did this analysis last year, I kind of saw it flipped where row crop tractors were up just slightly higher than what four-wheel drives were. And so, again, I don't think there's anything incredibly shocking with what we're seeing in this four-wheel drive and tractors. And then one last thing to close up the topic of those two, though, row crop tractors, four-wheel drives. I presented this at a previous webinar, but it's good to return to. Again, if you're less familiar with how this market has behaved in the last few years, it's really important if you're looking for comparables out there that the two are not the same. If you look back prior to 2020, on average values, you would see the two flip-flopped a little bit because you needed a large tractor with a lot of horsepower to pull certain types of implements up the field. Now, with row crop tractors, they're more versatile because you can run them in between the rows. You can use them for a whole lot more things, and the horsepower is gaining on them, and the technology is just increasing so much that what you're seeing on an average basis, and this is just the auction market, but it's reflecting that there's just more utility within these row crop tractors. There's more technology that people are paying for, and that's creating a divergence in the average values between these two types of machines. And so again, don't get mistaken that one can be essentially replaced for the other anymore, especially for comparables, because they can't.
Yeah, so I think, how do we apply this to operations every day? And I think, again, we'll show a few examples of that. So as we think about taking all this data as it's coming in real time, how do we appropriately account for that in a way that doesn't require us to hire more staff, and in a way that is standardized across our operation and is quick and easy to do? So we'll just jump in real quick to an example, and I'll navigate over here to Iron Comps. So it's down there.
Jeremy's got to get used to my mouth. He's got an apple and there we go.
All right, let's see if we can make this work. So this is probably familiar for a lot of you, but really the idea is like our responsibility to you is to make sure you have the most up-to-date data on the market to help you make the best decisions possible. So you're going to notice something new within IronComps as well. So we have these pop-ups or anything that's new within the tool. It's just a quick GIF or GIF or whatever it is to allow you to kind of get introduced to that. So again, for those who aren't familiar, this is the equipment list for the farmer. And the way that I would go do this is if I'm in renewal season, which we're in renewal season, and I need to adjust for current market behavior, I would come in here and I would just reset all of my values. So last year during renewal season, I came in, I added a piece they may have bought, I deleted one that they may have sold. I adjusted my values to the market and what it was doing. We look at auction and dealer as kind of the road ditches to valuation. So auction's that safe number, that liquidation number that we typically lean on. That dealer average is that listed average that is really kind of telling us where the market is going. And then valuation is going to happen somewhere within that road or kind of on the auction ditch. So we're pumping data into this list in real time, but we're not changing anything until you tell the system to change it. So going forward, we are now updating things for renewal season. I'm in on this particular grower's equipment list, telling IronComps to grab all the most recent data. So all the things that Andy has been talking to you about as far as trends, that's all representation of all the comparable sales data that we are gathering. And he's obviously extrapolating that out into trends and then being able to look at the market as a whole. When you apply that to an equipment list for a farmer, we're able to take those averages and help you assign value. So again, we're using their most recent comparable sales data plus all the different factors for each type of equipment that would go into making something valuable versus not. So a lot of times what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, hey, for all of my big stuff, so maybe 80% of the value on the list is in, these 6 items. Something new for those folks who are just getting back in from last year, we have the ability to now just adjust values based on those check boxes. So what we see happen and what we consider best practice is you take your most valuable items and you match that to what the market's doing. So what I'm going to do in this case is say, hey, give me 90% of the value of that auction average. And we're taking that as our number for these big 6 items, these big ticket items on the list. I'm just going to go adjust my values and it's going to update my value relative to that auction number. Now for the rest of the list, maybe we just want to apply some sort of like standard depreciation. So I can just go deselect these, the ones that I just got done updating, 2 combines here, and then make my adjustment from there, adjust my values. Now this time, as we think about that depreciation, I'm going to base it on last year's value. So again, it's all the small stuff. We're not really that concerned with, what auction and dealer is doing. We just kind of want to slap some standard depreciation to that. So you can do that for those items different than you would maybe some of your bigger pieces on the list. So very simple, quick, easy way for you to take all the data and intel that we're gathering from the market and apply that to a customer's balance sheet and their equipment list during renewal season. I think Andy's got even more creative ways to use it as he looks at data as an operator. So I'll let him kind of speak to some of that.
Yeah, and Jeremy did a great job of walking through that. The one thing I'll say is when I go in there, that's I don't use it obviously on the financial side as much as he does. I've created a couple equipment lists that I go in there and essentially have as my index. And so it might be a representation of a typical farm in Iowa versus other ones that might be a typical, maybe more cattle operation that I've got down in Texas. And just like you saw when Jeremy was hovering over his, and I just did this reset yesterday. So everything here should, I think, reset things straight up to auction. I can go and hover over this and start to see what my values are compared to the auction. And I do that and I can look in an instant. I try to get to this once a month. And I'll say, oh, now I'm significantly above what the auction averages are or significantly below. It gives me a good indication of how the market is moving versus when I saw it last time. And so this, you can take averages of each different category and look at it, but I like to look at this and say, okay, for my typical farmer that's sitting in Iowa, how is this machinery moved on their balance sheet? And is it something that I need to start paying attention to? And if so, then I'll dive down here and say, okay, where are my big differences coming from? Is it, I can sort this like Jeremy had it on the category level. It's coming from tractors, it's coming from harvest, is it something else? And so that's how I like to use my equipment lists. It's a good, quick and easy index for me to customize it to certain farmer scenarios. So anyways, that's my 2 cents there. Let's dive back in. And I love going through combines. I love going through tractors. The data's there, the consistency's there. Planters, not nearly as much. And so I'm going to hit this at a high level because there is so much variability with planters. I'm not even going to show you a year-over-year dealer and auction percent difference because it would be misleading any way I diced it. I even broke this down into DB60s. We have a lot of them, and there's still so much variability on a DB60 that it's really hard to get an inference. But what I did want to do here in this upper left, just show you relative price differences from different OEMs. These are the top 6 OEMs that we have in our database for dealer values. But even there's a lot of difference within that. For 24 row, yeah, Deere holds the market share there. As you change down to 16 and 12 row, that starts to change a little bit just because different OEMs have different sweet spots in what they do. And I can tell you, like Kinsey has got a lot more consistency within their pricing model, where Deere has a lot more variability. And so I'll let you just kind of gather and take this in. One thing though, diving back to what we talked about early, was if you can remember the long tails that I talked about with how the farming economy changes. So see this dealership supply up in the upper right, it would be for you. This production in 12, 13, 14 dip back up in 20, 21, 22. Does that look familiar? So no coincidence there. So again, just be familiar with that's how this industry works, supply and demand. One other thing I wanted to mention within planters, this is the same thing that goes within sprayers. I was talking with a dealer out east that said, type in on the description filter on the left on search results, ExactEmerge. And so on planters, ExactEmerge, ExactApply on sprayers, and use that description filter really for your comp averages when you're looking at high-tech items. And those are 2 great examples because you'll see a significant difference there. But if you're not using that description filter on your search results to find comp averages, do so. But then you can also do it and then find trends. And so that's again, if you want to find a trend on a planter, on a high-speed, high-tech precision planter, type in ExactEmerge and then go over to that dealer data that I showed you before with combines and see how that's trending, because it'll be different. And again, the jury's still out for some on high-speed planters. It makes sense in some regions versus others, but in general, it's going up. So self-propelled sprayers, probably the same thing, the same message applies here, that if you're looking for good comparables, use that description, and tech is driving these things up, if it has tech. I'll let everybody kind of gather in the percent difference here a little bit. I did go ahead on the dealer side. There's tons of variability, and so I didn't pull in the auction side. But on the dealer side, it does appear that the market is getting a little bit stronger. But again, you've got to look within the details on these. ExactApply, like I mentioned, is a big one. And if your farmer is not yet talking to you, assuming that your farmer is a corn farmer, if they're not yet talking to you about rust, they probably should be. Just taking over a good part of the country, and it could potentially be a massive yield ruiner. But there's certain sprayers that have the capabilities to spray later into the season with the boom height. And so that will start to differentiate the cost of a sprayer, especially as that becomes more prevalent and more farmers look for options to spray later in the season. And the hard part is you can't always contract that business out because it has to be done when you start to see emergence. And if you have to wait for a co-op to get there a week later, then you lose that control and you lose a lot of yield. And so I expect technology and capabilities, simply like boom height or boom adjustment, to start to carry a bit of a premium, and it already is.
So also just a note, when you're looking back at this, this graph here is for a used 1 to 2,000 hour sprayer. Okay, so that's sprayers and planters, tons of variability.
Yeah, so I think we'll start turning the corner here on this presentation and rounding things out with data for you. As you all are having your conversations with your farmers during renewal season this time of year, just as a quick reminder, free value for them is tractorzoom.com, so they can build their own equipment list. They can get a lot of these notifications from the data on when the market is moving as it pertains to the equipment that's in their shed or on the farm. And then as they're starting to look for shopping and understanding when's a good time to buy, they can get those notifications as well. So tractorzoom.com, they have free equipment list access, and then they have free exposure to all of our listing partners. And we make it really quick and easy to get over to that equipment so they can transact and make sure that they're getting what they need for their operation. So something free for your farmer, bring you extra value during renewal season. Just a quick advertisement there for you.
Yep, and we use it up on our farm too. We've got all of our farm, and we have split ownership on combines and 65-35, 50-50 on other things. And it's nice because we bought a combine this past year, and we just simply printed out our equipment list sheet, had the current values on it, all the percentages, handed it over. It was clean. That was not the hard part of making that purchase. Okay, last bit of data, and again, I threw in the forage equipment because I went down a rabbit hole. But taking a look at the forage equipment, because at the last conference I was at, saw this. And again, any of you in cattle country know that this is going on, but the reduction in herd size has been happening for a while, but it's getting fairly drastic right now. And depending on when this weather turns over, it could take another cut this year, especially just because the heifer herd is being sent a lot more to slaughters, shortness of grass, can't really support raising calves on no food. And so I was thinking, does this affect the overall industry? And really what I want you to pay attention to here, this far right side, you top out at 19, down a little bit, steady for 2021, down in 22, significant drop relative to that into 23. And so taking a look at balers, and within Iron Comps, if you don't know it, your baler description now has a baler count on it. And so if that's supplied by the dealership, which most of them do, auctioneers, not all of them put baler counts on their round balers, but a lot of them are starting to more now. And so what it allows us to do is look at the average price of balers, which we are always able to, but now you can run and balance that out with the average number of bales, the use of it. All in all, now we can start to see in 2019, the average price per bale on a baler, $1.74, dropped in 2020. Remember, this is starting to be when the herd size decreased 20 to 21, essentially flattened. And then now what you saw, and this is auction data, is a bit of a rise in 2022. A little counterintuitive on this one, but you did have the overall inflationary worries of equipment was short, and a lot of people were buying more equipment just because they thought it was all going to go out of style or out of supply. And that's what's been happening in the auction market last couple of years. There's no 23 data yet on this one, just because very few balers have hit the auction market just in the last month. It's not the season. But this is why we have dealer data, because it is a season. And so now we get a look here. And really what you should notice right away is that flip of the gold and the blue lines show that for dealers, obviously they're going to carry a price premium. You've got $2.50 per bale there, a little higher in 22. Again, remember that's all equipment was jumping up, not nearly as drastic as the equipment industry, but the dealers are just more modest price increases there. And then this is what we're seeing so far in 2023. And so this is kind of a forward-looking piece. Will we continue to essentially just hold steady as this cattle market gets figured out? But right now it's a month worth of data, but there are quite a few data points in there that it looks to be in this market influenced by the cattle industry to be holding steady with what they saw last year, but no price increases. And so does this mean that the inflationary pressures are balancing essentially with the external market? Okay, so that's it for data. I think we have one last thing that we wanted to share with you.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we can gather from all of this is obviously you need good, clean data to be able to make any of it work. And I think there's been a shift in focus on making sure we have that good, clean data, over the last half a decade or so. So one thing to keep in mind during renewal season this year, like if you don't have the information on some important pieces, like start to gather that information and gather usage information, because it's going to be far more directionally helpful for you to allow you to operate better. But also, as you get more information on your machinery, maybe you can start to focus on doing some more machinery loans, or starting to get creative as interest rates rise and people are accumulating less land. But all in all, I think the primary takeaway that I've seen with folks out kind of pushing the needle and evolving their practices is, how do we make sure we have the right information on what's in the barn, and how do we bring that into our practice so we can introduce automation and stress testing on demand, and then also help us get more creative with what we're taking to market and how we generate new business. So
Very good. And then I know there's a lot of dealers on here. If any of you are happen to be down in Vegas next week, we'll be presenting at JDoug for the John Deere user groups. But if you're not, we spent a lot of time producing a class down there on helping organizations become more data driven in their decision making. And so at a really high level, we wanted to share the 3 main points that we have that we'll be presenting on down there. Wanted to share it with you here. So these next couple slides, you'll get the PowerPoint, and I don't probably need to hammer this home, but that there are challenges becoming a data-driven organization. I know a lot of you are trying to do it, and you're facing probably all 8 of these. But obviously the benefits are huge as well, which again, not a big surprise to anybody. But at a very high level, down there, what we're going to talk about is culture and the importance of getting culture to be adopted as far as tech goes. And then we've got some best practices to help you move the needle that way. The time horizon, the big 2 takeaways there are, you do need a short-term win. So you need to be able to show your team, your leadership, and all your players on your team that you're after a short-term goal that provides the momentum. And then at the same time, you need to have a long-term perspective, because becoming a data-driven organization is not a one and done, that it does take a long-term commitment. And then, like Jeremy was talking on the data quality side, you've all heard that it's important. There's tons of scenarios out there where you can say where people did not have good data in, so garbage in, garbage out type of thing. One thing that I think Jeremy's team does extremely well, and you guys have really ramped up this year, is they started working alongside a lot of the farm credit organizations that are out there, and a lot of the lending institutions in general that have so much data, but they need it. It's good data, but it's not in the system, and so it's not usable. And so we've actually shouldered that on our team. And I know you guys have put in thousands of equipment lists that would have taken organizations, I don't know how many man hours or man years might be the more appropriate measure on it. But we've done that just to help people get started really realizing the benefits of those equipment lists and how much time that can save year over year. So if that's a daunting thing that's sitting on your plate of like, I have so much data, but it's not in the system and it's not usable, or it's in Excel, which love-hate relationship with Excel. If you need that to happen, this is the guy you need to talk to.
yeah, let us know. That's one thing that we've transitioned over the course of the last year, is we're just taking that lift on. So it's free of charge. We invest in helping you get to value quicker within IronComp. So we'll take all of your lists and bring them into the solution, and then help you reconcile any missing information or data that may need to be completed, and or dirty data that needs to be cleaned up during renewal season. So another thing I'd mention too is, coming this summer, we're going to have an appraisal app hitting the market. So when you think about capturing that data out on the farm or whatever you might be, it's going to be super quick and easy on the phone to be able to do that. So just quick heads up that will be hitting the market soon, and keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, you guys get 2 special insights today. Free of charge. So, okay. Well, anyways, quick summary about everything that we hit on. Obviously, combines depends on how new they are and if they're being produced, but really for a lot of things, it depends on how like new is it. And for the rest of the categories, we went over a lot of the year-over-year percent increases. So we'll be sending the reporting out ideally tomorrow, maybe the day after. And then if you have any other questions, though, especially on the equipment upload, Jeremy's your person to talk to. And then if you have any questions and want to jam on the insights, or if you have any other things that you're curious about, hit me up. And so you don't want to forget this.
Yeah, thanks to all who have helped us get this far. Again, we're really good at data and technology, but we don't know how to apply it without working with really great partners who push us to innovate with our solutions. So thank you. Here's just a quick list of some of those folks. Much more, if you don't see your name on there, I apologize, but much more behind the scenes as well that help us get to where we need to be. So continue to push us, continue to help us evolve for you. We're never done. So thanks to those who have helped us get this far, and we look forward to what the next year is going to bring.
Yep, absolutely. So again, if you have questions on who to reach out to or how to reach out to us, you got Jeremy's contact information there. You got my contact information off to the right. We'd love to hear from you. That's where a lot of these insights have come from, is these conversations and problem solving together. So, yeah, without anything more, we appreciate your guys' time today, and look forward to the next time we get to meet up. Take care.
Yep. See you.